Commander Zektar had seen death in 1,000 forms across the galaxy. The crystalline predators of Nexus Prime that could slice through titanium with their razor-sharp limbs. The mechanical swarms of the Void Engineers that consumed entire star systems to fuel their endless expansion. The ancient bioweapons left behind by the extinct progenitor race, still hunting anything that moved after 10 million years. None of them had prepared him for humans. The first time Zektar encountered humanity, he was leading a rescue mission to the outer rim planet of Kepler 442b. The distress signal had been broadcasting for 3 standard galactic months from what appeared to be a small research outpost. Standard protocol suggested the researchers were likely dead, but the Galactic Council insisted on sending a team to investigate. As a veteran commander of the elite Stellar Rangers, Zektar had volunteered for what seemed like a routine body recovery mission. His ship, the Void Walker, dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system. The planet hung before them like a blue-green jewel, eerily similar to the homeworlds of a dozen different species. But the scanner readings immediately told a different story. The atmospheric composition showed elevated radiation levels, and massive energy signatures indicated some kind of ongoing conflict on the surface. "Commander," his second-in-command, Lieutenant HFY, called from the sensor station, "I'm detecting multiple weapon discharges across the northern continent. Whatever's happening down there, it's big." Zektar studied the tactical display with growing concern. The energy readings were off the charts, far beyond what a simple research outpost should possess. "Any signs of the research team?" "Negative, sir, but I am picking up several unknown ship signatures in orbit on the far side of the planet. They're running dark, but our deep sensors caught the heat blooms." The commander's mandibles clicked in thought. This was supposed to be an uninhabited system except for the small human research station. Unknown ships meant pirates, slavers, or worse. "Take us in slow. I want to know what we're walking into before we commit to anything." As they rounded the planet, the true scope of the situation became clear. A massive fleet of ships hung in high orbit, their hulls bearing the crimson markings of the Razak Syndicate. Zektar's blood ran cold. The Razak were among the most feared criminal organizations in the galaxy, known for their brutality and complete disregard for any form of mercy. They dealt in slaves, weapons, and death, leaving scorched worlds in their wake. "Sir, I count at least 40 ships," HFY reported, his voice tense. 3 dreadnoughts, multiple cruisers, and what looks like a full invasion force. Whatever they're after down there, they brought everything they had. Zektar was about to order a strategic withdrawal when his communications officer suddenly straightened. "Commander, I'm receiving a transmission. It's coming from the surface." "The research station?" "I think so, sir, but the signal is incredibly strong, much stronger than a normal distress beacon." "Put it through." The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at a face that would haunt Zektar's dreams for cycles to come. It was human, he could tell that much, though he had only seen a few of their species in person before. But there was something in those eyes that made his scales crawl with an emotion he couldn't name. Not fear exactly, but something close to it. The human appeared to be female, though Zektar was never certain about their gender differences. Her face was streaked with dirt and what looked like blood, and her hair was matted with sweat. Behind her, he could see the interior of what looked like a military bunker, not a research station. The walls were lined with weapons and tactical displays. "This is Dr. Sarah Chen, formerly of the Kepler Research Outpost," she said, her voice steady despite her obvious exhaustion. "To any Galactic Council forces receiving this transmission, be advised that this system has been under siege by Razak forces for the past 4 months. The research station was destroyed in the initial attack." Zektar leaned forward. "Dr. Chen, this is Commander Zektar of the Galactic Rangers. We received your distress signal. What is your current situation?" A smile crossed the human's face, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. It reminded Zektar of the predatory grins he had seen on the carnivorous species of a dozen different worlds. Our situation, Commander, is that we've been teaching the Razak the meaning of the word regret. Before Zektar could respond, the screen split to show multiple camera feeds from across the planet's surface. What he saw defied everything he thought he knew about human capabilities. The northern continent was a war zone, but it wasn't the one-sided massacre he had expected. Somehow, impossibly, the humans were winning. The first feed showed what appeared to be a small group of humans, maybe 20 individuals, holding off an entire Razak battalion. They moved through the landscape like ghosts, appearing from nowhere to strike at enemy positions before vanishing again. Their weapons were primitive by galactic standards, chemical projectile throwers mostly, but they used them with a precision that bordered on supernatural. Another feed showed a valley where the wreckage of dozens of Razak vehicles lay scattered like broken toys. In the center of the destruction, a single human sat calmly cleaning his weapon while Razak bodies littered the ground around him. When a group of enemy soldiers tried to flank him, he dispatched them without even looking up from his task. But it was the third feed that truly shook Zektar to his core. It showed a human settlement that the Razak had obviously tried to overrun. The alien invaders had brought their full might to bear, including their feared war mechs, 12-foot-tall robotic killing machines that could level city blocks. The settlement should have been wiped from existence in minutes. Instead, Zektar watched in stunned silence as the humans systematically dismantled the attacking force. They didn't just fight the war mechs, they turned them against each other. Somehow, the humans had hacked into the machines' control systems and reprogrammed them to attack their own forces. The Razak soldiers found themselves caught between their own weapons and human defenders who seemed to anticipate every move they made. "How?" Zektar whispered, forgetting his comm was still open. Dr. Chen heard him. "You're wondering how a small research team managed to hold off the Razak Syndicate for 4 months?" "Yes," he admitted. "That's because we weren't really a research team, Commander. We were advanced scouts." The pieces suddenly clicked into place in Zektar's mind, and he felt that strange emotion again, stronger this time. Advanced scouts for what? For the colonization fleet that's been following 3 days behind us. 700 ships carrying 2 million human colonists, along with their military escorts. Dr. Chen's smile widened. The Razak thought they were attacking a helpless research outpost. What they actually did was threaten human civilians. Zektar had heard the stories about human protective instincts, but he had always assumed they were exaggerated. Every species in the galaxy had some form of protective behavior toward their young and vulnerable members. But what he was seeing on the screens suggested something far beyond normal defensive responses. "Dr. Chen, our sensors indicate the Razak fleet has over 40 ships. Even if your colonization fleet has military escorts, the odds are not in your favor." "Oh, Commander," she said, and now her voice carried something that made Zektar's blood freeze in his veins. "You still don't understand. The Razak made a critical error in their intelligence gathering." "What error?" "They assumed this was a normal human colonization effort." "It's not." The camera switched to show another part of the underground facility, and Zektar saw humans in military uniforms working at control stations. But these weren't standard colonial defense forces. The equipment was too advanced, too military, and there were far too many of them for a simple research mission. "This is Forward Operating Base Kepler, Commander. We've been tracking Razak movements in this sector for over a year. When intelligence indicated they were planning to establish a major base in this system, we decided to set a trap." The implications hit Zektar like a physical blow. "You used your own colonists as bait?" "We used ourselves as bait," Dr. Chen corrected. "Every person on this planet volunteered for this mission, knowing exactly what it entailed. The colonists don't arrive for another 2 days, and when they do, they'll be arriving to a system that's been cleared of Razak presence. But the odds... Commander, let me explain something about humans that your species' databases might not have covered. We don't just fight when we're cornered. We don't just defend when attacked. When someone threatens human civilians, especially human children, we become something else entirely. As if summoned by her words, alerts began sounding throughout Zektar's ship. His tactical officer's voice cut through the noise. Commander, multiple hyperspace signatures incoming. Ships dropping out of FTL at the edge of the system. The main display switched to long-range sensors, and Zektar felt his legs go weak beneath him. Ships were materializing out of hyperspace in a precisely coordinated pattern that spoke of military planning and execution at the highest level. But these weren't the colony ships he had expected. 57 vessels and counting, his tactical officer reported, voice tight with amazement. I'm reading battle cruisers, destroyers, carrier platforms, and... My God, is that a planetary siege platform? Dr. Chen's voice drew his attention back to her transmission. Commander, I'd like you to meet the human Third Expeditionary Fleet. They've been hunting the Razak Syndicate for the better part of 2 years. Thanks to our operation here, they now have the entire Syndicate fleet trapped in one system with nowhere to run. Zektar watched in fascination and growing horror as the human fleet deployed with mechanical precision. They didn't charge in with weapons blazing like most species would have. Instead, they moved to form a perfect sphere around the planet, cutting off every possible escape route. The Razak fleet, suddenly aware of their predicament, began launching fighters and moving to intercept. What followed wasn't a battle in any sense that Zektar understood. It was an execution. The human ships moved like predators, coordinating their attacks with a precision that suggested they had been planning this exact scenario for months. Every shot was calculated, every maneuver designed to force the Razak ships into predetermined positions. When the alien criminals tried to break through the human lines, they found themselves flying into carefully laid traps. But it was the ground assault that truly demonstrated the difference between human warfare and anything else in the galaxy. Instead of sending in massive armies to overwhelm the remaining Razak ground forces, the humans deployed small teams of soldiers who moved through the battlefield like death itself. Zektar watched one team of 5 humans systematically dismantle a Razak stronghold that should have required an entire regiment to assault. They didn't just attack the position, they psychologically destroyed the defenders. Using a combination of advanced tactics, superior technology, and what could only be described as calculated terror, they turned the enemy's own fears against them. Dr. Chen, Zektar said, his voice barely steady, what I'm seeing, this level of coordination, this tactical precision. How long have your people been planning this? This specific operation? About 18 months. But hunting the Razak? We've been doing that since they made the mistake of attacking a human colony ship 7 years ago. Her expression darkened. They took prisoners, Commander, human prisoners, including children. What happened to them? We got them back. All of them. And we made sure the Razak understood that attacking human civilians comes with consequences they can't imagine. As if to punctuate her words, one of the massive Razak dreadnoughts on the main display suddenly went dark. It didn't explode in a burst of flame and debris like normal ship kills. It simply stopped. All power, all movement, everything. Cyber warfare, Dr. Chen explained, seeing his confusion. We've been inside their systems for hours, learning everything about their fleet composition, their backup plans, their escape routes. When we finally acted, we didn't just attack their ships. We attacked their entire command and control infrastructure. Zektar realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Most species fought wars to achieve territorial or resource-based objectives. They conquered, they retreated, they negotiated. But what the humans were doing here was something else entirely. This wasn't conquest or defense. This was eradication. Commander, Dr. Chen continued, I want you to understand something important. What you're seeing here isn't humans at our most dangerous. This is us being merciful. Merciful? We could have simply sterilized this system from a safe distance. We have the technology. But we chose to come here in person, to give the Razak a chance to surrender, to allow them to face justice through proper legal channels. She paused, studying something off-screen. Approximately 67% of their fleet has just signaled surrender. Those ships will be boarded and their crews taken into custody for trial. And the remaining 33%? Dr. Chen's smile returned, cold and predatory. They chose to fight to the end. We're honoring that choice. As Zektar watched, the remaining Razak ships that had refused to surrender found themselves systematically isolated and destroyed. But even in their destruction, the humans showed a level of tactical sophistication that was almost artistic. Each ship was disabled in a way that minimized collateral damage while maximizing psychological impact on the survivors. Dr. Chen, I have to ask, why are you showing me this? My ship isn't a threat to you. Because, Commander, this is a message. Not for you personally, but for the Galactic Council and any other organization that might be watching. She leaned closer to the camera, and Zektar found himself unable to look away from those eerily calm human eyes. Humans are applying for membership in the Galactic Council. We want to be part of the galactic community, but we want everyone to understand exactly what kind of neighbors we're going to be. The last of the Razak resistance crumbled as Zektar watched, and suddenly the system was quiet, except for the steady movement of human ships collecting prisoners and securing the area. In less than 6 hours, the humans had completely eliminated one of the most feared criminal organizations in the galaxy. Commander, Dr. Chen said, would you like to come down to the surface? I think there are some things about humans that your databases are missing. Zektar wanted to refuse. Every instinct in his body was screaming at him to leave this system immediately and never return. But his duty as a galactic ranger required him to file a complete report, and that meant getting the full story. Very well, Dr. Chen. I'll be down shortly. As his shuttle descended toward the planet's surface, Zektar tried to process what he had witnessed. In his long career, he had seen the aftermath of countless battles and conflicts. He had studied military tactics from dozens of different species, but nothing had prepared him for the casual, methodical way humans approached warfare. They didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like apex predators who had never known fear. And that, Zektar realized with growing dread, was what made them truly terrifying. It wasn't their technology, though that was impressive. It wasn't their tactics, though those were devastating. It was the complete absence of doubt or hesitation in their actions. They moved through combat like it was simply another job that needed to be done. As his shuttle touched down at the human base, Zektar wondered if the Galactic Council truly understood what they were considering when humanity applied for membership. These weren't just another species seeking to join the galactic community. They were predators who had learned to wear the mask of civilization, and they were about to become his neighbors. The human base was unlike any military installation Zektar had ever seen. From the outside, it looked like a standard prefabricated research station, the kind that could be deployed on any frontier world. But as his shuttle settled onto the landing pad, he could see the subtle modifications that revealed its true nature. Concealed weapon emplacements, scanner-resistant materials, and hardened bunker entrances that could withstand orbital bombardment. Dr. Sarah Chen met him at the airlock, and Zektar was surprised to see that she was smaller than she had appeared on the screen. Most species in the galaxy measured physical threat by size and obvious weaponry. By those standards, this human female would barely register as a minor concern. She stood perhaps 5.5 feet tall, with a slight build that suggested she spent more time behind computer terminals than in combat training. But her eyes told a different story entirely. "Welcome to Kepler Base, Commander," she said, offering what humans called a handshake. Zektar had read about the gesture but had never experienced it. Her grip was firm without being aggressive, and her skin was surprisingly warm against his scaled fingers. "I hope the trip down wasn't too uncomfortable." "The shuttle ride was fine, Dr. Chen, though I have to admit the view during our approach was educational." She smiled at that, a genuine expression this time rather than the predatory grin he had seen during their transmission. "I imagine it was. Most species don't get to see a human military operation from start to finish. We tend to keep our methods to ourselves." As they walked through the base corridors, Zektar noted how the human soldiers they passed moved with casual efficiency. There was no strutting or posturing, no obvious displays of aggression. They simply went about their tasks with the kind of quiet professionalism that spoke of absolute competence. More disturbing was how they looked at him, not with hostility or suspicion, but with the calm assessment of predators evaluating potential prey. "Dr. Chen, I have to ask about something that's been troubling me. During the operation I witnessed, your forces showed remarkable restraint in some situations and absolutely no mercy in others. What determines the difference?" She stopped walking and turned to face him. "That's an excellent question, Commander. The answer is simple: surrender. Any Razak ship or soldier that signaled surrender was taken alive and will be handed over to Galactic Council authorities for trial. Those who chose to fight to the death were accommodated." "But how do you make those distinctions in the heat of battle?" "We don't leave it to chance. Every human military unit includes what we call ethics officers, soldiers specifically trained to monitor combat situations and ensure we maintain proper standards of conduct. Even in the middle of the most intense firefight, someone is always watching to make sure we don't cross lines we've set for ourselves." They entered what appeared to be a briefing room, where several other humans were waiting. Dr. Chen introduced them as members of her team. Though Zektar quickly realized that calling them researchers was like calling a plasma cannon a communications device. These people were soldiers, every one of them, with the kind of quiet competence that came from years of combat experience. "Commander," said a human male identified as Colonel Harrison, "Dr. Chen tells me you're here to file a report on our operations. Before you do that, there are some things about human military doctrine that might be helpful for your Galactic Council to understand." "I would appreciate any insight you can provide." Harrison gestured to a holographic display that showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Red dots marked Razak territory, while blue dots indicated human colonies and military positions. 3 years ago, the Galactic Council classified the Razak Syndicate as a manageable threat. Your standard response to their activities was to implement trade sanctions and diplomatic protests. That's correct. The Council believes in resolving conflicts through peaceful means whenever possible. And how well did that work? Zektar shifted uncomfortably. The Razak continued their activities, but within acceptable parameters. Acceptable to whom? Dr. Chen asked quietly. "Because I can show you the records of 17 different species that were driven to near extinction while the Council was implementing sanctions." The holographic display changed to show population charts and casualty reports. Zektar had seen these statistics before, filed away in bureaucratic reports that had been discussed briefly and then forgotten. But seeing them presented this way, with the humans' clinical attention to detail, made the numbers feel different, real. The Vektari Republic lost 60% of their population to Razak slave raids, Colonel Harrison continued. The crystal cities of Nexus Prime were strip-mined for rare minerals. Entire colonies of peaceful species were wiped out or enslaved. And through it all, the Galactic Council continued to believe that somehow, eventually, the Razak would respond to diplomatic pressure. The Council's approach is based on thousands of years of successful conflict resolution, Zektar said, though even as he spoke the words, they felt hollow. With respect, Commander, your approach assumes that all species share certain basic values. That everyone ultimately wants the same things and can be reasoned with if you just find the right incentive structure. Dr. Chen pulled up another display, this one showing psychological profiles. But that's not how predatory species think. The Razak don't raid and enslave because they need resources or territory. They do it because they enjoy causing suffering. Colonel Harrison leaned forward. We spent 2 years studying Razak behavior patterns, analyzing their tactics, interviewing survivors of their attacks. Do you know what we found? Zektar remained silent. They deliberately target the most vulnerable populations first. Children, elderly, anyone who can't fight back effectively. They record the suffering they cause and distribute it as entertainment. When they take prisoners, they don't just use them for forced labor. They psychologically break them for sport. But surely not all Razak. All of them, Commander. Dr. Chen's voice was flat, matter of fact. We captured and interrogated over 3,000 Razak soldiers during our campaign. Every single one of them had participated in atrocities that violated so many interstellar laws that we stopped counting at 50. The room fell silent for a moment, and Zektar found himself struggling with concepts his species had never really had to confront. The Talkari, his people, were naturally peaceful. They had conflicts, certainly, but they were usually resolved through negotiation or, at worst, limited military action with clearly defined objectives. The idea of an entire species dedicated to causing suffering was almost incomprehensible. So, what do you do with them? He asked finally. The ones who surrendered will face trial, Colonel Harrison replied. We believe in due process, even for war criminals. The ones who fought to the death, well, they made their choice. But what happens after the trials? Even if they're convicted, the Galactic Council doesn't have a death penalty. Dr. Chen and Colonel Harrison exchanged a look that made Zektar's scales crawl. That's something the Council will need to figure out, Commander, because we can't allow them to be released. What do you mean? I mean that if the Galactic Council sentences them to imprisonment and then releases them after a few years, as usually happens, those same individuals will return to raiding and enslaving innocent populations. And when that happens, we'll hunt them down again. But next time, we won't be offering surrender as an option. The implications of that statement settled over Zektar like ice water. You're talking about executing prisoners. We're talking about protecting innocent lives, Colonel Harrison corrected. The Council's justice system is designed for species that can be rehabilitated, that have some capacity for change. It doesn't work for predators who view mercy as weakness and treat kindness as an opportunity to cause more harm. But surely there must be alternatives, prison worlds, rehabilitation programs, psychological treatment. Commander, Dr. Chen interrupted gently. May I show you something? She gestured to another display, and suddenly Zektar was looking at recorded footage from a Razak slave ship that had been captured 6 months earlier. What he saw made his stomach turn and his vision blur. He had to look away after only a few seconds. That footage was taken from a ship carrying prisoners from the Kethmori colony, Dr. Chen said quietly, including 237 children. The Razak weren't just transporting them for sale as laborers, they were entertaining themselves during the journey. Zektar felt sick. How many survived? 14, all of them so psychologically damaged that they may never recover. Her voice remained steady, but he could see something cold and terrible in her eyes. Now tell me, Commander, what rehabilitation program do you think would help the individuals responsible for that? I don't know. Neither do we. So we've reached a different conclusion. Some individuals, some entire groups, are simply too dangerous to be allowed to continue existing. The universe is better off without them. Colonel Harrison pulled up tactical displays showing the aftermath of the battle. Every Razak ship we captured was searched thoroughly. We found detailed records of their activities going back decades. Millions of deaths, Commander. Millions of innocents who died in agony because the galactic community couldn't bring itself to take decisive action against an obvious threat. But if everyone thought like that— They don't, Dr. Chen said firmly. That's what makes humans different, and what makes us dangerous. We're capable of making the hard choices that other species can't or won't make. When faced with absolute evil, we're willing to respond with absolute force, even if it makes you no better than them. The question hung in the air for a long moment. Then Colonel Harrison spoke, his voice quiet but carrying absolute conviction. Commander, there's a fundamental difference between killing to cause suffering and killing to prevent it. The Razak destroyed lives because they enjoyed it. We destroyed them because it was necessary to protect innocent people. But how do you maintain that distinction? How do you avoid becoming the very thing you fight against? Dr. Chen smiled, and this time there was genuine warmth in it. That's why we have ethics officers and oversight committees and detailed rules of engagement. That's why we offered surrender to enemy forces and took prisoners when they accepted. That's why we're turning captured criminals over to the Council for trial instead of executing them ourselves. But you just said— I said we can't allow them to be released to commit more atrocities. I didn't say we would be the ones to stop them if the Council fails to keep them contained. Her expression grew serious. But Commander, if the Galactic Council proves incapable of protecting innocent lives from convicted predators, then yes, humans will step in to do what's necessary. Zektar realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Every species had military forces, but they were designed to protect territorial integrity or pursue limited political objectives. What the humans had created was something else entirely. A military specifically designed to hunt down and eliminate threats to innocent life, regardless of political boundaries or diplomatic considerations. Dr. Chen, what you're describing sounds like you're positioning humanity as some kind of galactic police force. Not exactly, Colonel Harrison said. We have no interest in governing other species or imposing our values on anyone. But we will not tolerate the systematic abuse of innocence, regardless of who's doing it or what justifications they offer. And if the Galactic Council disagrees with your assessment of what constitutes a threat? The two humans looked at each other again, and Zektar felt that familiar chill run down his spine. Commander, Dr. Chen said carefully, humans have been part of the galactic community for less than 50 years. In that time, we've observed how the Council operates, how it makes decisions, how it responds to various types of threats, and we've reached some conclusions about its effectiveness. What kind of conclusions? The Council is excellent at mediating disputes between reasonable parties. It's very good at establishing trade agreements and cultural exchange programs. It's moderately effective at dealing with territorial conflicts between species that share basic ethical frameworks. She paused. But it's completely useless against genuine predators. That's a harsh assessment. It's an accurate assessment. The Razak Syndicate operated for over 30 years before we eliminated them. In that time, the Council passed 14 resolutions condemning their activities, implemented 7 different sanctions packages, and authorized exactly 0 military operations against them. Colonel Harrison pulled up a new display showing casualty statistics. In those 30 years, the Razak killed or enslaved approximately 12 million sentient beings. How many of those deaths could have been prevented if the Council had taken decisive action after the first few incidents? Zektar stared at the numbers, feeling a growing sense of unease. What are you suggesting? We're suggesting that the galactic community needs to evolve beyond its current approach to dealing with existential threats, Dr. Chen replied. Diplomacy and sanctions work when you're dealing with rational actors who have something to lose. They don't work against predators who view mercy as weakness. So humans are going to take it upon themselves to decide who lives and dies? No. Commander, humans are going to take it upon themselves to protect innocent life when no one else will. Her voice softened slightly. We don't want to be the galaxy's executioners, but we will be if that's what it takes to keep predators from preying on the helpless. The briefing continued for several more hours, with the humans showing Zektar detailed analyses of various ongoing threats throughout the galaxy. They had intelligence networks that spanned dozens of sectors, early warning systems that could detect potential threats before they became critical, and response capabilities that made his own Stellar Rangers look like a local militia. But what truly disturbed him was how matter-of-factly they discussed what were essentially assassination programs. They talked about eliminating entire criminal organizations the way other species discussed trade negotiations, as simply another tool of policy to be used when appropriate. "Commander," Dr. Chen said as the briefing wound down, "I want to make something clear. Humans didn't evolve to be killers. We're naturally cooperative, social creatures who prefer to solve problems through community effort and mutual aid. But we also evolved on a world where hesitation meant death, where threats had to be eliminated quickly and completely, or they would eliminate you. Most species evolved under similar pressures." No, they didn't. Most species evolved in environments where the biggest threats were other members of their own species competing for resources. Humans evolved in an environment where everything was trying to kill us. Big predators, small predators, diseases, weather, even the plants were often toxic or carnivorous. Colonel Harrison nodded. It gave us a very specific psychological framework. We're capable of extreme cooperation within our social groups, but we're also capable of viewing outside threats as problems to be solved permanently. And right now, Dr. Chen added quietly, humanity views organizations like the Razak Syndicate as outside threats. As Zektar prepared to return to his ship, he found himself struggling with questions he had never had to consider before. The humans had presented a compelling case that their methods, while brutal, were ultimately more effective at protecting innocent life than the traditional council approach. But they had also revealed themselves to be something fundamentally different from any other species in the galactic community. They were predators who had learned to hunt other predators, and they were about to become full members of the Galactic Council. The journey back to Council space gave Zektar time to think, but the more he considered what he had witnessed, the more troubled he became. His ship's computer held detailed recordings of everything the humans had shown him, along with extensive documentation of their military capabilities and strategic thinking. By any objective measure, it was the most comprehensive intelligence report on human warfare that had ever been compiled. It was also, he realized, a death sentence for his career and possibly his life. The Galactic Council operated on consensus and compromise. Its leadership consisted of beings who had spent their entire careers navigating complex political relationships between dozens of different species. They understood trade negotiations, territorial disputes, and cultural exchanges. What they did not understand was the cold calculus of predator elimination that the humans had demonstrated on Kepler 442b. If he filed his report accurately, it would almost certainly lead to humanity's application for council membership being rejected. Worse, it might lead to preemptive military action against human space. The council had never faced the prospect of a member species that could and would unilaterally eliminate threats they deemed unacceptable. But if he didn't report accurately, he would be complicit in bringing something into the galactic community that could fundamentally alter the balance of power forever. 3 days out from Kepler, Zektar received an encrypted message from Dr. Chen. The transmission was brief but disturbing. "Commander, You should know that our intelligence networks have identified 17 other criminal organizations similar to the Razak Syndicate. We will be addressing them systematically over the next 2 years. We thought the Council should have advance notice. 17 organizations. Zektar pulled up his files on known criminal groups and felt his blood run cold. If the humans were planning to eliminate every predatory criminal organization in the galaxy, they were essentially declaring war on a significant portion of the galactic underworld. The political ramifications would be enormous. His communications officer interrupted his brooding. "Commander, we're receiving a priority transmission from Council headquarters. Admiral Vexathul wants to speak with you immediately." Admiral Vexathul was the military commander of the Stellar Rangers and one of the most respected officers in the galaxy. He was also, Zektar knew, deeply suspicious of humanity's growing military presence in Council space. "Commander Zektar," the Admiral's familiar voice came through the secure channel. "I trust your mission to Kepler was successful?" "Yes, sir, though the situation was more complex than our initial briefing suggested." "So I've heard. We've been monitoring transmissions from that system, and what we've seen is concerning. Tell me, in your professional opinion, what exactly did we witness there?" Zektar chose his words carefully. "We witnessed a highly sophisticated military operation conducted by human forces against the Razak Syndicate. The humans demonstrated tactical capabilities and strategic thinking that exceeded our previous assessments." "Exceeded how?" "They didn't just defeat the Razak, Admiral. They eliminated them as an organization, completely and permanently." There was a long pause on the channel. "Commander, I'm sending you new orders. You are to proceed directly to Council headquarters and brief the full Security Committee. Do not discuss your findings with anyone else until that briefing is complete." "Understood, sir. And Commander, I want you to be very careful in how you present your report. There are political implications to consider." The transmission ended, leaving Zektar alone with his thoughts and his growing sense of unease. Admiral Vexthul's warning had been clear. Present the facts in a way that wouldn't destabilize the galactic political order. But how could he do that when the facts themselves were potentially destabilizing? 2 weeks later, Zektar found himself standing before the full Security Committee of the Galactic Council. The chamber was filled with representatives from 37 different species, each one a senior military or political leader. At the center sat Council Director Thelnari, whose species had been instrumental in founding the galactic government over 1,000 years earlier. "Commander Zektar," Director Thelnari began, "we understand you have a report on recent human military activities. Given that humanity's application for full Council membership is currently under review, your findings are of particular interest to this committee." Zektar activated his presentation display and began with the basic facts. The Razak Syndicate's presence in the Kepler system, the human research station, the subsequent military operation. He presented tactical analyses and casualty reports with professional detachment. But when he reached the strategic implications of what he had witnessed, the mood in the chamber began to shift. "Committee members," he said, "the humans demonstrated capabilities that go far beyond normal military operations. They conducted what can only be described as a campaign of total eradication against the Razak Syndicate." "Surely you're overstating the case," interrupted Representative Kolvex of the Andromedan Republic. "No single operation could eliminate an organization as large as the Razak." "With respect, Representative, that's exactly what happened. The humans didn't just defeat Razak forces in the Kepler system. They used the operation as the final stage of a galaxy-wide intelligence and elimination campaign that had been ongoing for over 2 years. As of my last briefing, the Razak Syndicate no longer exists as a functional organization." The chamber erupted in murmurs and shocked exclamations. Director Thelnari called for order. "Commander, you're suggesting that humanity conducted military operations across multiple sectors without informing this council?" "Yes, Director. and according to my sources, they have similar operations planned against 17 other criminal organizations. The committee members looked at each other with growing alarm. Representative Sildena of the Crystalline Confederation leaned forward. Commander, did the humans give any indication that they would submit to Council oversight of these operations? Zektar remembered Dr. Chen's words about protecting innocent life regardless of political boundaries. No, Representative. In fact, they made it clear that they consider the protection of innocents to be a fundamental human responsibility that supersedes political considerations. What does that mean exactly? Demanded Admiral Vex Thule, who was attending as a committee observer. It means, Admiral, that if the Council proves unable or unwilling to deal with threats to innocent populations, humans will take unilateral action. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. What Zektar was describing wasn't just a military threat. It was a fundamental challenge to the Council's authority and the entire structure of galactic governance. Director Thelnari spoke carefully. Commander, in your opinion, would humanity respect Council decisions regarding the use of military force? Zektar thought about the casual way the humans had discussed eliminating entire criminal organizations, their matter-of-fact attitude toward what other species would consider acts of war. Director, I believe humanity would respect Council decisions that they considered consistent with protecting innocent life. But if they viewed Council decisions as enabling or ignoring threats to innocents, they would act independently. That's unacceptable, declared Representative Morthak of the Hegemony of Suns. No species can be allowed to decide unilaterally what constitutes a threat worthy of military action. With respect, Representative, Zektar replied, humanity has already demonstrated that they can and will make such decisions. The question before this committee is how to respond to that reality. For the next 6 hours, the committee grilled Zektar on every aspect of his report. They wanted details about human weapons technology, tactical doctrines, intelligence capabilities, and strategic thinking. But as the briefing progressed, it became clear that the committee was struggling with a problem it had never faced before. Every previous applicant for Council membership had sought to join the galactic community as a junior partner, accepting Council authority and gradually building influence through political channels. Humanity was essentially announcing that they would join as equals, with their own priorities and their own methods of pursuing them. Commander, Director Thelnari said finally, what is your recommendation regarding humanity's membership application? Zektar had been dreading this question. Director, from a purely military perspective, human capabilities would significantly strengthen Council security forces. Their intelligence networks are more extensive than ours. Their military technology is more advanced, and their tactical thinking is more sophisticated than anything we currently possess. But their strategic philosophy is fundamentally incompatible with traditional Council approaches to conflict resolution. They view certain types of threats as requiring permanent elimination rather than containment or rehabilitation. If we accept them as members, we need to understand that they will sometimes act in ways that contradict Council policies and procedures. Representative Kolvex leaned forward. Commander, do you believe humanity poses a direct threat to existing Council members? Zektar considered the question carefully. Not to species that share basic ethical frameworks and don't engage in predatory behavior against innocents, but any species or organization that humans classify as a threat to innocent life. Yes, they would be in significant danger, even if they were Council members. I don't know, Representative. I would hope that Council membership would provide some protection, but I honestly can't say with certainty. The committee deliberated for 3 days before reaching their decision. When Zektar was called back to receive their findings, the chamber's atmosphere was tense and subdued. Commander, Director Thelnari announced, the Security Committee has voted to recommend conditional approval of humanity's membership application. Conditional on what, Director? Conditional on humanity accepting certain limitations on their military operations. They must agree to submit all cross-border military actions to Council oversight. They must accept Council authority in matters of galactic security. And they must agree to operate within established legal frameworks for dealing with criminal organizations. Zektar felt a chill run down his spine. Director, what if humanity refuses to accept those conditions? Then their membership application will be denied, and we will need to consider other options for managing the threat they potentially represent. The committee was dismissed, but Admiral Vexthul asked Zektar to remain behind. When they were alone, the Admiral's expression was grim. Commander, I want you to understand something. The committee's decision was not unanimous. There are those who believe humanity should be rejected outright and possibly preemptively contained. Contained how? Economic sanctions, territorial restrictions, possibly military action if necessary. The Admiral moved to the chamber's main display and called up a star map. Humanity currently controls or influences 17 star systems. Their population is approaching 8 billion. They have significant industrial capacity and military assets that continue to grow. You're talking about war. I'm talking about preventing humanity from becoming a threat to galactic stability. Better to act now while we still have overwhelming numerical and territorial advantages than to wait until they become too powerful to stop. Zektar stared at the display, trying to imagine the carnage that would result from a war between humanity and the rest of the galactic community. Admiral, based on what I witnessed at Kepler, I don't think such a conflict would go the way you're assuming. Explain. Humans don't fight the way we do, sir. They don't just prepare for the conflicts they expect. They prepare for conflicts they hope never to fight. They don't just train to defend their territory. They train to eliminate threats permanently. If we attack them preemptively, we won't just be starting a war. We'll be proving to them that we're the kind of threat that needs to be eliminated. Admiral Vexthul studied the star map for a long moment. Then what do you recommend, Commander? I recommend that we be very careful about the conditions we try to impose on their membership. Because if we make demands they can't accept, we may find ourselves facing exactly the kind of conflict you're hoping to avoid. 1 month later, humanity's response to the Council's conditional membership offer arrived at Galactic headquarters. The document was brief, polite, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. The humans accepted the general framework of Council membership, including participation in trade agreements, cultural exchanges, and cooperative scientific endeavors. They agreed to respect territorial boundaries of existing Council members and to participate in diplomatic processes for resolving disputes. But they explicitly rejected any limitations on their military operations against what they termed predatory threats to innocent life. They would inform the Council of such operations when practical, but would not submit them to Council oversight or approval. Furthermore, they included a list of 14 criminal organizations that they had classified as targets for elimination, along with detailed intelligence files demonstrating the scope of atrocities these groups had committed. The message was clear. These organizations would be destroyed regardless of Council opinion. The document concluded with a statement that would be quoted in history books for centuries to come. Humanity seeks to be a constructive member of the galactic community, but we will not allow bureaucratic procedures to prevent us from protecting innocent life. The universe is a dangerous place, and sometimes dangerous problems require dangerous solutions. The Council voted to accept humanity as a member under the terms they had offered. 3 years later, Zektar received news that all 14 organizations on the human target list had been eliminated. The operations had been conducted with clinical precision, minimal collateral damage, and no advance warning to their targets. In each case, criminals who surrendered were turned over to local authorities for trial. Those who fought to the death were accommodated. The galactic crime rate dropped by 67% in 18 months. But Zektar found little comfort in those statistics. He had seen something in human eyes that still haunted his dreams, the calm certainty of apex predators who had never learned to fear anything. They weren't evil or malicious. They were simply the most dangerous species in the galaxy, wearing the mask of civilization and calling themselves peacekeepers. The universe had become a safer place for the innocent and defenseless. It had also become a much more dangerous place for anyone who threatened them. Late at night, when his duties were done and his official reports filed, Zektar would sometimes stand at his apartment window looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships were patrolling the shipping lanes, hunting down pirates and slavers with methodical efficiency. Human intelligence networks were mapping criminal organizations and planning their destruction. Human strategists were identifying threats to innocent life and developing ways to eliminate them permanently. They had kept their promise to be constructive members of the galactic community. They participated in trade negotiations, cultural festivals, and scientific conferences. They shared technology and knowledge freely. They honored territorial boundaries and respected diplomatic protocols. But they had also made it clear that they viewed themselves as the galaxy's immune system, identifying and destroying threats that the regular political process couldn't or wouldn't handle. And the truly terrifying thing, Zektar realized, was that they were probably right. The galaxy was a better place with humans in it, safer for the weak, more dangerous for predators, more stable overall. But it was no longer a place where any species could simply assume that their power or influence would protect them from consequences. The humans had taught the galaxy's predators a simple lesson. There was always a bigger predator, and sometimes that bigger predator wore the face of civilization and called itself justice. Zektar had battled monsters and machines across a dozen star systems. He had faced creatures that could tear through starship hulls with their bare claws and artificial intelligences that could process tactical information faster than biological brains could comprehend. But only humans had taught him what real fear felt like. Not fear of death or pain, but fear of judgment. Fear of being evaluated by beings who looked at the universe with clear eyes and simple moral standards, who distinguished between the innocent and the guilty with terrifying precision, and who were willing to act on their conclusions regardless of politics or consequences. The Galactic Council had gained its most valuable member. It had also gained its most dangerous one. And in the quiet moments between crises, when the galaxy enjoyed its new security and prosperity, Zektar sometimes wondered what would happen if humanity ever decided that the Council itself had become a threat to innocent life. He never spoke that fear aloud. But late at night, staring at the stars that now flew human flags, he couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere out there, human strategists were already planning for that possibility too, just in case.